Today, we're diving into a really strange and often painful paradox. Why is it that some of the brightest minds out there often feel the most lost, the most exhausted, in a world that, on paper, should be theirs for the taking? Let's get into it.
I mean, just let that image sink in for a second. A racing engine stuck in traffic. This isn't about a lack of motivation or willpower. This is about a deep, fundamental mismatch between a high-performance brain and the world it's forced to live in. And to really understand what that feels like, let's look at someone's story.
So, to make this all real, let's talk about a guy we're going to call Adrian. His journey, with all its high potential and hidden struggles, might just feel a little familiar to some of you. Okay, so Adrian, ever since he was a kid, he was the gifted one, the one who was supposed to just cruise through life and succeed. But now, he just feels hollow. He bounces from one job to the next, not because he's incapable, but because the sheer monotony of it all feels like actual physical pain. His coworkers think he's a little unstable, maybe a bit too intense. So he's learned to hide it, to dumb himself down just to get along. So what is really going on in Adrian's head?
Well, the answer isn't some kind of character flaw. It's actually rooted in his biology. To get what's happening to people like Adrian, we have to look at the unique and kind of weird wiring of the gifted brain.
What Adrian's feeling? It has a name: synaptic starvation. Now, that sounds technical, but think of it like this. His brain has this massive appetite for complex, juicy information, but it's being fed a constant diet of, well, bland, simple, repetitive tasks. It's not just bored, it's literally starving.
And the science behind this is fascinating and honestly a little counterintuitive. It's something called the neural efficiency hypothesis. And what it basically says is that high IQ brains are incredibly efficient. For simple or even moderately difficult tasks, they actually use less brain power, fewer neural resources than an average person does to get the same job done.
Now, that efficiency is an absolute superpower when you're tackling something really complex. But in a typical day-to-day environment, it means the brain is almost always just idling. It's like using a supercomputer to run a four-function calculator. The system is so underused that it pretty much starts to shut itself down. And as if that wasn't enough to deal with, there's another crucial piece to this puzzle: asynchronous development. This is a core part of the gifted experience. It just means the brain doesn't develop at an even pace across the board.
And this right here perfectly illustrates that inner conflict. You might have someone with the intellectual horsepower of a 14-year-old, able to grasp incredibly abstract ideas, but their emotional maturity is more like that of an 8-year-old. So they can debate philosophy, but then have a complete meltdown over a minor frustration. Can you imagine how confusing and isolating that must feel on the inside? So let's put it all together. You've got this super efficient, unevenly developed brain, and you stick it in an environment that never challenges it. This creates a perfect storm for chronic understimulation. And that experience isn't just annoying, it is genuinely painful.
So what are the real tangible consequences when this high-performance engine is just never allowed to open up and run? It doesn't just get a little bored, it actually begins to break down.
This leads to a state that's so often mistaken for laziness or apathy: bore-out. Now, we've all heard of burnout, right? That's from too much stimulation, too many demands. Well, bore-out is its evil twin, caused by chronic under-stimulation. And if you look at the symptoms, they look almost identical: exhaustion, listlessness, that brain moat feeling. But the cause is the complete opposite: a profound, soul-crushing lack of meaningful challenge. And the fallout from this is severe. The brain's dopamine system, which literally feeds on novelty and learning, just crashes. This paralyzing state of bore-out can then spiral into a really deep existential depression, where you start questioning the entire point of everything. And for some, that desperate, clawing need for any kind of stimulation can push them towards destructive behaviors and addictions just to feel something. But here's the thing. The problem isn't just what's happening inside. A huge, massive part of this struggle comes from the outside world, from a society that just completely misunderstands and invalidates the entire experience. Society often punishes this natural intensity with these subtle but incredibly powerful phrases. You ever heard this one? A classic dismissal of a mind that's just doing what it's built to do.
Or how about this one? A criticism of their heightened emotional depth, which is directly linked to how deeply their brains process absolutely everything.
And finally, this one: a direct command to shut down the very cognitive engine that makes them who they are.
See, each one of these phrases sends the exact same message. Your depth, your intensity, it's a problem, not a strength. So what do you do when the world keeps telling you that your very nature is too much? Well, you learn to mask. You hide how quickly you think. You bite your tongue when you see a pattern that nobody else does. You pretend to be average. It's a survival tactic, but it comes at this enormous cost: your own authentic self. So if any of this, and I mean any of this, is hitting home, this final section is for you. It's about completely reframing this whole experience, not as some kind of personal failure, but as something else entirely. First, and this is so important, that heavy, restless, soul-crushing boredom you feel, it is not laziness. It is not a moral failing. It is a signal. It's that simple. Just like physical pain screams at you to pull your hand away from a hot stove, this mental pain is your brain's fire alarm. It is screaming for complexity, for meaning, for a real challenge. Your mind isn't broken. It's just built for a different kind of racetrack. This intensity, this sensitivity, this relentless need to know, it's not a burden. It's the engine itself. It is a gift that is desperately demanding room to run. So maybe, just maybe, the real challenge isn't to somehow become more normal or to learn how to tolerate being understimulated. Maybe the bravest and most important work you can do is to stop cutting your wings just to fit in a small space, and instead start building a world big enough to accommodate their full span.